Hello and welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time zone that you're tuning in from. My name is Nathan Bennett, and I'm speaking to you in my role as the chair of the People in the Ocean Specialist Group for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and also as the founder of the Ocean Defenders Project. Today, I am really thrilled to co-host this launch event for the report, Ocean Defenders, Protectors of Our Ocean Environment and Human Rights. I also want to start the webinar by dedicating this report to ocean defenders worldwide who are organizing, advocating, and protesting for the protection of the ocean environment, their marine territories and resources, and their human rights. It's our hope that it helps to increase knowledge of, bring greater attention to, and increase support for ocean defenders worldwide. Next, to start, we will play a short video with some introductory remarks from Astrid Puentes Riaño, the UN Special Rapporteur on the human right to a healthy environment.
Congratulations for the publication of this very important report on ocean defenders, protectors of our ocean environment and human rights. And congratulations to everyone who made this happen, because it is a result of a lot of work for a few years all over the world, identifying, learning, and working with communities and people in the ocean and protecting the ocean to make this report happen. And this is why it is an honor for me as the UN Special Rapporteur on the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment to share with you today a few remarks and to have written the foreword with my predecessor, David Boyd, and contribute a little bit to this wonderful report. And it's very important to talk about ocean defenders today because, of course, they are also human rights defenders, and their work is crucial for the protection of many human rights, including food, water, health, culture, livelihoods, and also, of course, the human right to a healthy environment. But despite this very important role, their contribution is not valued as it should. In many situations, actually, when there is it's talk and it's addressed or measures are implemented around environmental human rights defenders, the work and the role of ocean defenders is invisible. However, human rights violations against ocean defenders are increasing with the expansion of harmful activities in marine and coastal environments with inadequate protective measures from states and businesses. Especially indigenous peoples, coastal communities, and women, girls, youth, and children are leading advocacy efforts to protect their livelihood and cultures against extractive industrialization of the ocean. Today, we have seen, unfortunately, how ocean defenders suffer increasingly from harassment, intimidation, marginalization, criminalization, attacks, and even assassination. So all of these human rights violations must stop. And instead, ocean defenders should be recognized, rewarded, and supported because protecting them is a prerequisite for effectively, equitably protecting the ocean, but also for the protection of their human rights. And this is not only for present, but also for future generations. And in this process, one of the most powerful tools that ocean defenders also have to strengthen the very important work that they have is the use of the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment that, as you know, was recognized by the UN Human Rights Council in 2021 and by the UN General Assembly in 2022. The human right to a healthy environment has also been recognized by 85% of states all over the world. This is 164 states that today have the right to a healthy environment either in their constitution or legislation. And also some subnational authorities like the Australian Capital Territory have recognized this right. And I really encourage you all and we all to use it, because when we talk about the right to a healthy environment, we talk about healthy biodiversity and ecosystems, of course, including the ocean. We also talk about safe climate, non-toxic environments, clean air, safe and sufficient water, healthy and sustainably produced food. We also talk about access to information, public participation, and access to justice and remedy, which are absolutely important to strengthen and be able to advance the work that ocean defenders are doing. As we know, all ocean issues are human rights issues. And in that, I really encourage you all and we all to continue using the right to a healthy environment to strengthen ocean governance and to protect the ocean for present and future generations. Once more, thank you very much for the invitation to this very important event. And congratulations. I wish you all the best. And I really look forward to continue coordinating and working together with ocean defenders for the protection of the ocean on all our planet.
Thank you, Astrid, for those poignant words of introduction, which really emphasize the importance of human rights in the context of the ocean and of safeguarding ocean defenders. And that brings us to the main agenda for the report launch. Next, we will introduce Ocean Defenders and the Ocean Defenders Project. Then we will provide an overview of the main insights from the project and the report. And after that, we will have a panel of guests who will make brief remarks on the report, the current situation of ocean defenders, and what is needed to further support and strengthen ocean defenders' efforts. And then I will make a few closing remarks. So globally, surging demand for resources has intensified economic activities and driven resource extraction deeper into peripheral regions. When done poorly, not only does this threaten the environment, but it can also place pressure on and displace indigenous peoples and rural populations from their lands and undermine human rights. In the face of these growing threats, environmental defenders or environmental human rights defenders all around the world are taking it upon themselves to respond to and resist these incursions. Environmental defenders can be defined as individuals and groups who organize, mobilize, advocate, and protest for the protection of the environment and related human rights against harmful or threatening activities in a peaceful manner. What unites them is a connection to and common care for the environment and the willingness to mobilize and raise their voices on behalf of the environment and people's rights. And yet, environmental defenders worldwide are experiencing an array of risks, including routine marginalization, criminalization, threats, violence, and even assassinations. Closing civic spaces, political and corporate corruption, and a culture of impunity are enabling governments and corporate actors to perpetrate these acts that undermine the rights of environmental defenders. The importance of protecting environmental defenders is acknowledged by the United Nations in the text of the Global Biodiversity Framework and in resolutions and global program of work of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And yet, even though there is increasing attention to environmental defenders, past definitions, policy documents, research, advocacy, and supports often neglect ocean defenders of marine and coastal environments. And when they are not explicitly called out, ocean defenders are ignored and neglected by those working on these topics. So in an initial high-level paper in 2022, a few of us sought to highlight this issue and provide an initial definition for ocean defenders. We defined ocean defenders as individuals, groups, or communities who mobilize, advocate, or take action to protect the marine environment, their coastal and oceanic territories, and associated human rights against existential threats, which stem from exclusionary and poorly implemented development or management activities. Ocean defenders are different from the local stewards who proactively care for the marine environment and local resources based on local knowledge, practices, and governance. Ocean defenders are instead thrust into the role of having to reactively defend against external threats to the marine environment, their territories, and human rights. Here, we came to recognize that ocean defenders are facing many different threats, often simultaneously. They come from diverse groups and walks of life. They work in all regions of the world. They use numerous resistance strategies, and they are experiencing the same risks as their counterparts on land. And so, recognizing the scale of the issue and the gaps in everything from knowledge to practice, the Ocean Defenders Project was launched. The overarching goal of this project is to increase knowledge of, raise the profile of, and bring greater support to ocean defenders. This project was made possible with support from IUCN CEESP, the Commission on Environmental, Economic, and Social Policy, the Packard Foundation, the Welton Family Foundation, Oak Foundation, the Coastal Renewal Society, and the People Seas Initiative. With over 40 collaborators and contributors, we work together to amplify the visibility of ocean defenders and promote greater support for their resistance efforts. You can learn more about our outputs, engagements, and resources on the website. And that brings us to the latest output of the Ocean Defenders Project, which is the report that we are launching today, which is titled Ocean Defenders, Protectors of Our Ocean Environment and Human Rights. The report contains an introduction to ocean defenders, case studies of ocean defenders from around the world, analysis of key insights from the case studies and from the project, chapters by Global Witness and the Allied Data Working Group on data related to lethal and non-lethal attacks, a collation of over 100 resources, and a summary of key insights. During today's webinar, we will summarize the main insights from the project and the report. First, human rights violations related to ocean economy development are on the rise. The ocean economy is experiencing a rapid period of growth, including the intensification of current economic activities, expansion into new geographies and areas of the ocean, and the emergence of new industries. A blue acceleration is clearly shown by this analysis by Jouffret and colleagues. While there is the possibility that these ocean economic activities can be sustainable and equitable, in many cases, coastal communities and populations are experiencing numerous negative environmental and social impacts from activities of the ocean economy. Our analysis of the case studies of ocean defenders, for example, shows an array of perceived negative social and environmental impacts. The most identified environmental impacts were related to declines in fish productivity and abundance, followed by degradation of marine ecosystems, impacts on species, habitat destruction, and pollution and contamination. The most identified social impacts were related to traditional and small-scale fishing livelihoods, social and cultural impacts, negative economic impacts, food insecurity, exclusionary governance, tenure and access, displacement or relocation, and physical or psychological violence. What this means is that in many places, the growing ocean economy may be leading to violation of substantive human rights, including rights to a healthy ocean, food, livelihood, health, and security. The collective tenure and access rights of Indigenous peoples and small-scale fishers are also at stake. Furthermore, coastal communities are often not being adequately informed, including or consenting to decisions relating to emerging activities that will impact the ocean environment and their lives. Second, around the world, ocean defenders are actively defending the ocean environment and human rights. Conflicts between coastal communities and ocean economy projects are ubiquitous across different social, economic, and political contexts. In the face of mounting global threats from the growth of the ocean economy, ocean defenders are being forced into reactive mode. Various groups of ocean defenders, including small-scale fishers, Indigenous people, women, youth, and broader civil society networks, are mobilizing and taking action to protect the ocean environment, their territories, and human rights. Collaborators on the Ocean Defenders Project have been documenting a growing number of case studies of ocean defenders in different contexts. A number of these are up on the website, and they're also included in the report. The case studies show how ocean defenders use diverse tactics to resist threats from the ocean economy, including legal and policy interventions, creating organizations and networks, awareness and communications campaigns, public protests and demonstrations, research and documentation, and engaging in disruptive activities. While the emphasis in the media and in the conservation community is often on individual environmental defenders, these case studies highlight the collective nature of mobilizations and efforts by ocean defenders to protect the ocean and safeguard their rights. Here we provide a brief snapshot of several of these case studies. And to do so, I want to introduce the project manager and co-lead editor of the report, Dr. Rocio Lopez de la Lama, who is currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of British Columbia and will soon be starting a Marie Curie Fellowship. Over to you, Rocio.
Thank you, Nathan. So next slide. Yes, so the first case study takes place in Brazil, where several Brazilian coastal communities were hit by a large and ongoing oil spill from an unknown source between August of 2019 and June 2020. While multiple hypotheses exist about the source of the spill, fishers were left without proper government assistance to either contain or minimize the impacts. Thus, fishers mobilized and tried to clean up the beaches themselves, but with limited success. The oil spill was never properly addressed or even investigated by the Brazilian government. Next, please. In Cameroon, the rapid expansion of the industrial fishing is squeezing out local fishers and threatening their livelihoods. Foreign industrial trawlers are operating with impunity for transgressions while being protected by the national government and military. This dynamic has led to constant conflicts between small-scale fishers and industrial vessels. As marginalization and oppression are the common lived experiences of small-scale fishers in Cameroon, they are restricted from protesting for the environment and their rights. Next, please. In Chile, the expansion of salmon aquaculture, particularly in the south, has been massive, with little regard for its impacts on coastal communities. In response, local indigenous communities are establishing EMPOs, Espacios Costeros Marinos de Pueblos Originarios, to regain control over their territories and mitigate the environmental and social damage caused by the salmon industry. Since EMPOs serve as a legal mechanism to prevent the establishment of new salmon farms, tensions between the private sector and indigenous peoples are escalating. Next, please. In Senegal, women play a central role in small-scale fisheries, particularly as they are the ones in charge of processing the fish for its distribution. Sadly, they face growing challenges from industrial overfishing and fish meal production, which are depleting the fish stocks they rely on. Women-led groups are starting to advocate for sustainable fishing, but their efforts have been met with harassment, threats, and even forced removals from their traditional processing sites by both the government and companies. And finally, in Turkey, overfishing and industrial fleet overcapacity are threatening marine ecosystems and small-scale fisheries. In response, Istanbul Birlik, a nationwide association, is advocating for fair fishing quotas and sustainability. Their collective action is strengthening small-scale fishers nationwide, despite the repressive political environment they are in.
So this set of case studies just gives you a sense of the different challenges faced worldwide. And we want to emphasize here that while ocean defenders operate in diverse governance contexts, there's evidence across many different environments of widespread repression and a worrying number of murders. All people must be secure in their right to gather, organize, and peacefully protest for the protection of the ocean environment and human rights. Yet civic space is closing for those who would organize, mobilize, and speak on behalf of the ocean environment. Ocean defenders are experiencing non-lethal attacks, including political marginalization, threats and harassment, repression and silencing, delegitimization and denigration, arrest and imprisonment, physical violence, generation of social division and conflicts, damage to property, criminalization, economic marginalization, and lawsuit. There's also evidence across the world that ocean defenders are being murdered at a worrying rate. The stakes are high socially, economically, and physically for ocean defenders, their families, and their communities. And it appears that perpetrators of repression and violent acts against ocean defenders are often acting with impunity. There's very little evidence that they're being held to account across case studies and across other sources of evidence around the world. The fourth insight from the project is that research on ocean defenders is nascent, and there's still much to know and learn. A limited and incomplete understanding of the situations facing and lived experiences of ocean defenders in different contexts and geographies undermines our ability to take effective action to support and safeguard them. There's a need to better understand the drivers behind threatening ocean development activities, the impacts of ocean governance frameworks on human rights and ocean defenders, the level of recognition of human rights within ocean governance frameworks, the extent to which human rights are respected in different types of ocean development, conservation, and management activities, whether government and businesses in the economy are complying with their obligations and responsibilities, and how safe different national governance contexts are for ocean defenders. Documenting a larger number of case studies would also allow for a deeper and more systematic analysis of factors affecting risk levels and chance of success for ocean defenders. Sharing these stories also allows ocean defenders to learn from and about one another's challenges and successes. A fifth insight from the Ocean Defenders Project is that significant gaps exist in the data regarding lethal and non-lethal attacks on ocean defenders. Various organizations and groups are engaged in the important, challenging, and ongoing work of documenting both lethal and non-lethal attacks against environmental defenders. Examples include this report by Allied from 2024 that sheds light onto the scale and prevalence of violence against defenders. For every reported death, they documented 5 events of non-lethal attacks. However, past data collection efforts have mostly focused on repression and attacks of defenders of terrestrial and freshwater environments. For instance, Global Witness has registered the top 2023 defender killings per country, and that's available in their 2024 report. And as you can see here, all of these countries are coastal ones. And nonetheless, in many of these cases of documentation, the ocean defenders remain largely invisible. Yet the available evidence suggests that ocean defenders around the world are also experiencing similar issues. And the number of acts of repression, murders presented in our limited number of case studies also hints at a much broader problem, especially if one considers the sheer number of coastal communities worldwide who are facing and resisting threatening ocean development activities. Thus, there is a pressing need to fill the gaps in data on repression of non-lethal attacks on and murders of ocean defenders to better understand the scale of the issue, hotspot geographies, problematic sectors, and the characteristics of perpetrators. The sixth insight is that governments and the private sector must do more to meet their obligations and responsibilities to protect human rights, including the rights of ocean defenders. Under international human rights law, states have an obligation and the private sector has a responsibility to protect human rights, including the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and to safeguard the rights of ocean defenders. Yet it is clear that many governments and private sector actors are not doing enough. States must also maintain an enabling environment for the people to gather, organize, and advocate for sustainable ocean and related human rights. Violators of human rights and perpetrators of attacks must be held to account. Ocean defenders should not only be free to operate without harassment, threats, and violence, their work should be encouraged and celebrated.
So insight number 7 is ocean defenders need more direct support and safe spaces to support their agency and sustain their efforts. From our research, we identified that ocean defenders have various needs to enhance and strengthen their capacity for organization, mobilization, and resistance. These needs include being able to understand the threats they are facing, finding adequate allies, and resourcing their efforts. To satisfy these needs, ocean defenders need access to the following support strategies: creating and supporting solidarity network, capacity development, legal support, advocacy and facilitation, financial support, increasing visibility, as well as research and documentation. For these strategies to be as effective as possible, it is essential, again, to create safe civic spaces where ocean defenders can gather and organize without any fear of harassment, threats, or violence. Furthermore, these spaces need to foster that ocean defenders can learn from others in similar situations, strengthening networks of care and solidarity. For insight number 8, next please. Allied organizations can play an important role in supporting and safeguarding ocean defenders. The support strategies that ocean defenders require are offered already by various allied organizations, including grassroots networks, funders, legal nonprofits, human rights institutions, NGOs, university researchers, as well as the media. The support of allied organizations in itself is often a game changer for ocean defenders. However, as identified in this report, the scale of the issues often exceeds the scope of available organizational support. Furthermore, many allied organizations have struggles of their own. Some of them include securing sustainable financing, alliance and network building, maintaining flexibility in organizational agendas, and being able to work in politically challenging environments. This leads us to the 9th and final insight, which is efforts to support ocean defenders must be fit to context and center their voices and needs. Ocean defenders operate in diverse contexts with varying levels of political marginalization and repression. It is essential then that any action to support ocean defenders centers their voices and needs, ensuring they lead decisions on when, where, and how support is provided. This is especially important to prevent putting ocean defenders, their families, and communities at further risk. Organizations working to support ocean defenders will need to facilitate careful collaborations, build trusting relationships, listen attentively, assess risks, and consider the broader implications of their actions.
So that brings us to the end of a whirlwind overview of the 9 broad insights from the report of the Ocean Defenders Project. Now we're going to play a short video with some initial reflections on the report from Michel Forst, the UN Special Rapporteur on Environmental Defenders elected under the Aarhus Convention.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I was not able to join you live today, but I've been asked to say a few words, and I'm very happy to do so. In the report that's being launched today, its authors wrote, and I quote, "It is our hope that this report helps to increase knowledge of, bring greater attention to, and increase support for ocean defenders." I must admit that I've not read the entire report. However, I am quite confident that this objective will be quickly achieved, and I am positive about this because the very fact that we are gathered today to discuss this topic already would contribute to bringing greater attention to ocean defenders and hence to protecting them. Secondly, because as I skimmed through the report, I could immediately see how its content could inform my work as Special Rapporteur. The data, the analysis provided on the risks that ocean defenders face is key. It is essential in understanding and addressing this issue collectively. And I'm very grateful for the work conducted by the Ocean Defenders Project, really. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for putting together this report, for starting these important discussions, and most importantly, for raising the voice, raising the profile of those who are too often marginalized, intimidated, or even killed for having exercised their most fundamental right to defend human rights, including the right to live in a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. As I once said in a side event on peaceful protest at sea, it was held during a session of the International Seabed Authority. It was in March 2024. We unfortunately live in a world where public and private interests are ready to harm our environment with a greed that seems to have no limit. No limit, not even the bottom of our oceans. And unfortunately, this greed exposes those who fight against it, like ocean defenders, to very serious risks. I don't want to be too long, as I know very well that video messages can quickly become boring. I just wanted to conclude with a call to the audience and to ocean defenders specifically, as well as with a few words about my mandate and how it could contribute to the protection of ocean defenders. The last chapter of this report focuses on the role of allied organizations for ocean defenders. And with that in mind, I would like to invite ocean defenders to look at my mandate this way and to consider me as one of their allies. Because as Special Rapporteur, I can receive complaints. I can take measures to protect environmental defenders who face threats, who face attacks for their involvement in the protection of the environment and the planet. This obviously includes ocean defenders who are part of this large family. Without getting into too many details, I also wanted to highlight that my ability to protect defenders as Special Rapporteur depends very much on where the threats or attacks are happening. To summarize this broadly, if an ocean defender is threatened within the territory of a country that ratified the Aarhus Convention, I can intervene for any kind of threat coming from any actor. Could be states, could be private companies or individuals. My mandate is very broad in these cases. But if the threat is occurring outside of this territory, for instance, in Africa or Asia or Latin America, then my mandate is more limited. I can only intervene if the threat comes from a company headquartered in one of the host parties, for instance, Belgium, Denmark, France, Spain, or the UK, to name only a few of the 48 host parties. To give you an example, a company based in Africa, in France, operating in Africa, would threaten defenders in Africa, then defenders from those countries could seek protection from my mandate. A company based in Madrid, operating in Latin America, doing harm to defenders, I could also take the cases of those defenders from Latin America because the company is based in one of the countries that has ratified the Arms Convention. Dear friends, as defenders, ocean defenders are welcome to submit complaints to my mandate when they face persecution for defending the marine or for defending coastal environment. I would be more than happy and proud to be considered your ally. To all the ocean defenders, I would like to say you are not alone, I am with you. I wish you a very productive launch of this very important report. Thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you, Michelle Force, for that insightful message on the role of the UN Special Rapporteur. And with that, that brings us to our discussion panelists, and we've invited 5 panelists to comment on the report, the current situation of ocean defenders, and their perspective on what is needed to further support and strengthen ocean defenders' efforts. And our 5 panelists are Lara Ferronis, Lamin Jazi, Samia Salim, Alison Wright, and Leopoldo Gerhardinger. And I'm going to just stop share for a little bit, and then I'm going to introduce the panelists one by one to offer some insights from their perspective into the report and future efforts. So the first panelist that we're going to bring up is Laura Ferronis, who's a environmental scientist and currently serves as a senior advisor to the Land and Environmental Defenders Campaign at Global Witness. She is the lead author of its landmark annual report on violence against defenders. Laura has also worked in tropical forests for over 20 years. Throughout her career, she's worked closely with civil society organizations, grassroots movements, and indigenous peoples across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Please go ahead, Laura.
Thank you, Nathan. Good morning, afternoon, everybody. And well, many thanks for inviting me to the launch of this very important report. It's been fascinating, troubling, and inspiring all at once to hear about these insights. And, you know, we have just heard about the hard realities and the very real dangers ocean defenders face across the world as they simply try to do their jobs. Sadly, and to underline what Nathan mentioned just before, ocean defenders are not alone in this respect. These realities are also true for so many other defenders working to protect our lands, our natural resources, our environment, and ultimately our future. The organization I work for, Global Witness, documents the murders of land and environmental defenders globally, and our latest data from 2023 shows that 196 defenders were murdered that year. This is, to give you an idea, this is the equivalent of almost 4 people per week, every single week of the year. And it also tips the total number of killings to over 2,000 globally since Global Witness started reporting data in 2012. That is over 2,000 murders, over 2,000 lives. Now, I would like to emphasize that documenting reprisals against defenders poses great challenges, and we've heard a bit about that already, because there are essentially huge gaps in data. It is simply not possible to get the full story. Data is scattered, it's insufficient, it's inaccessible, and sometimes it is entirely lacking. In that sense, our data is most certainly an underestimate of what's really happening on the ground. This is evidently also true for ocean defenders. In other words, many stories will simply remain untold. Now, if we look at the global data in a little bit more detail, we can see that the large majority of the killings of land environmental defenders, 85% in 2023, took place in Latin America. And, you know, this is not new by any stretch of the imagination. Latin America consistently has the highest number of documented murders of defenders without exception. So in countries like Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, Honduras, we document alarming figures year in and year out. In Asia, we also document significant number of cases in countries like the Philippines, but it's also true that much of what happens in the region and much of what happens in Africa, for that matter, remains hidden. Access to information continues to be particularly challenging in both regions. So again, these figures are most likely gross underestimates. Nathan also touched on this, but I would like to highlight that, you know, it's important to note that killings are the most brutal form of attacks, but we're also seeing a wide range of reprisals against defenders worldwide, including abductions, arrests, smear campaigns, criminalization, and many other forms of non-lethal attacks by governments, businesses, and non-state actors. All of these other types of reprisals have damaging impact on defenders, often for the rest of their lives. They are essentially impacting anyone taking a stand. For ocean defenders, that also includes local communities protecting the seas and its resources, as well as those who try and protect them or try to raise awareness, and that might include lawyers, journalists, fisheries observers, etc. Lastly, but perhaps crucially, if there's one thing that defines attacks against all types of land environmental defenders, including ocean defenders, that is impunity. In other words, establishing a direct link or a direct relationship between the murder of a defender and specific interests is really very hard. In most cases, there's too little information and there's too little action to elucidate what might have happened. And so it's rare that anyone is arrested or brought to court for killing defenders. When they are, it is usually triggermen. In other words, you know, the ones shooting the gun, not the ones who might have planned or paid for the crime to happen. And all of the above is at the heart of why Global Witness publishes its annual report and why we continue to work with defenders across the world. It is clear to us, and I think it's clear to everyone here, that in a planet in crisis, in climate crisis, we need the voices of ocean defenders, land defenders, forest defenders, and so many other defenders more than ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura, for these sobering statistics. You know, it's hard to hear, and in many ways, the idea that people protecting the environment are lethally or non-lethally attacked is one of the saddest things that I can imagine. And in terms of the oceans, you know, those of us who work on the oceans know that the oceans are often out of sight and out of mind, and that's certainly the case in terms of ocean defenders. So thanks for sharing it and for the important work that you do. The next person that I'm going to have reflect on the report and on ocean defenders is Lamine Jazzy. Lamine is Executive Director of the Gunjur Conservationists and Ecotourism Association, and they're dedicated to environmental conservation, to coastal activism, and to fish meal factory campaigning. His work focuses on rebuilding fisheries, defending coastal communities, and combating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. He also serves as a conservationist and a sustainable development practitioner. Lamine, please offer your thoughts and your insights from where you sit.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much for that very detailed introduction. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone. Lamine from the Gambia, West Africa. We're into ozone activism for many years. I am very grateful to be part of this, to hear our part of the story. Fishery sector in the Gambia is the major contributor to food security, livelihood, and as well as poverty alleviation. Fisheries and fisheries-related activity has employed more than 200,000 Gambians. So it is a huge amount of people depend on fisheries for their livelihood. It's not different from any part of the world. Ocean defenders experience a lot of intimidation, a lot of criminalization, a lot of all different things, a very long court proceedings to just intimidate you and deter from your activities. We've experienced a lot. We're just going to straight and see what are some of the massive challenges or some of the things that we need as ocean defenders for us to be able to continue our work. Gambia as a country doesn't have never have a fisheries data that you could be held government officials, departments to be able to make an informed decision. So organization I'm working with is working very hard to look into data collection into a major fish landing site in the country that will help us as a country to know the amount of fish that goes into our communities, the amount of fish that end up going into the fish meal factories. The fish, the main raw material of the fisheries of fish, the main raw material of factories is the small pelagic fish. This is a very important fish in our country. This is the fish that every poor family depends on daily basis to feed their family, and is the cheapest source of protein for each of those families. This is a very fish that the fish meal factories depend on to process that fish into powder and fish oil and export them back to China and other parts of Europe. They feed in aquacultures and other farms while they're taking food from the common man in Africa, and they make us hungry and even sick because the cheapest chicken that is imported from Europe that is cheaper than the fish today in Gambia. So it's a massive and it's important for us to be able to have a correct data to be able to know the gap of data in the country, and for government to be able to make the right decision between human consumption and the fish meal factories. We also were looking forward to have use of appropriate technologies to be able to monitor and track the fishing trawlers. The amount of fishing trawlers in our water is unbelievable, and we came to realize most of the people that ask to protect our waters are on the pay scales of these fishing trawlers. So that makes it very difficult for ocean defenders to be able to work effectively and control these fishing trawlers, because the people that we depend on to work with and give them the correct information to be able to make the right decision are on the pay slip of these fishing trawlers. So the amount of corruption in the fishing sector in the country is unbelievable. That is why we wanted to develop ourselves as activists, as ocean defenders, to be able to monitor these fishing trawlers, and most of the time they fish in the wrong zone. According to Fisheries Act, they should not fish within the 9 nautical miles. But if you are standing on the shore, you see them fishing. So that is the reality on the ground. And when you contact the people responsible, they hardly respond. So when we equip, we could be able to monitor and have a data and have a factual data that we could be able to share with them as evidence. Because our challenge that we have most of the time when we challenge them, we don't have a concrete evidence because we are not equipped and we do not have a needed material to be able to give them that factual data. The other thing that we're looking for is advocacy, to be able to establish and support national and regional networks for civil society, community-based organizations, and the other stakeholders to combat the effect of destructive method of fishing in the region we need to have a coalition of different environmental organizations across the sub-region to be able to work together effectively. We as a human being, we have a border, but fish didn't have any border. So we need to work together as a region to be able to combat this effort. The lastly that we want to see, where most of the fish meal factories are built, they remove women that are into fish processing in those places, and they build the fish meal factory into those places. These women have a very terrible condition in terms of when they are processing their fish. Most of them are into fish processing, but their processing facilities are very, very bad. And we're working with thousands of women to be able to help them to improve their condition, their fish processing condition, to be able to have, because this is very detrimental to their health. So that is why we're working with a lot of women to be able to have a better processing facilities for them to continue working, supporting their children, supporting their families, but as well, their lives are very important. Most of the time, they have a lot of very strange sicknesses because of the amount of smoke in their processing facilities. So those and many other things, that's why the organization is looking forward to improve them. So we're looking forward to anyone who could be able to work with us in giving us support to be able to remedy these positions. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Thank you, Lamine, for this important intervention. I think you've clearly highlighted the sheer number of small-scale fishers that are on the coast. And this is similar to many other places in the world where small-scale fishers are so incredibly important for livelihoods as well as for nutritional security. And in fact, across Ocean Defenders case studies, the largest issue that's being experienced around the world is issues related to industrial fisheries, illegal, unregulated fisheries, and also often issues related to aquaculture feed. And thanks also for really showing us, the types of actions that Ocean Defenders are taking and the needs they have, in particular as it relates to women, because many of these case studies have a gender dimension. So thank you so much for your intervention there. Our next speaker that I'd like to pull up on the screen is Samia Salim. And Samia is a professor and the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. She's a marine social scientist who specializes in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research, which focuses on natural resource government, climate change adaptation, as well as marine conflict. And her current work focuses on ensuring equity and blue growth, resilience in small-scale fisheries, and ecosystem-based adaptation in coastal regions of Bangladesh. Please go ahead, Samia.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the launch of this report. I think, as Laura also mentioned, this journey for me, the last 3 years of working with Ocean Defenders in Bangladesh has been insightful, challenging, but also very inspiring. The community, the Ocean Defenders we have been working with, along with allies and other practitioners, has been this conflict on how fishing communities in Matabari, Bangladesh have been displaced, lost their livelihoods due to big mega project development. And our work has been trying to understand, their resistance, their struggles, but also how the collective action that they have taken, what has helped them to get their voices heard, the challenges they faced. And part of being this report brings together such very ground level, from the ground understanding of Ocean Defenders across the globe. And, as being a researcher, and working with these communities, I've had some key insights, which I think, again, would be helpful as we try to understand more about the struggles and injustice done to Ocean Defenders and how we can support them. And one of these insights is that there's no one definition of Ocean Defenders. I know one of the things we're trying to understand is, who are they? What are these hidden faces? What's behind them? What are their struggles? And we have to take this very place-based contextualized understanding where we bring in the cultural dimension, socioeconomic conditions, and then to try and see, you know, what the struggles are and how they can be supported. So for example, one of the things we're still trying to understand is, you know, what leads to more quiet resistance. So you know, that slow understanding how social networks works, you know, how do you bring the legal, the global, the human rights dimension, and all this, I think, is really highlighted in each and every one of the case studies in this report. So that gives us, you know, a deeper understanding. There's so much we don't know. Again, you mentioned this in one of the key insights, you know, there's obviously the lethal, the killings of defenders, but it's those hidden, the non-lethal, the threats. And in Bangladesh's case study, what we found was, again, when the community, you know, if there's poverty, a lack of education, you know, the threat of, you know, they're being forced to sell their land at a cost that they had no idea what their legal rights are. They don't know what social protection they fall under. So it's very easy then to, you know, for these big companies to use all kinds of legal instruments to buy the land or to offer jobs which won't exist, you know, after a while. So all these little, you know, insights on how loopholes are used by, you know, companies and outsiders that offer, you know, that threaten these communities. And lastly, the other really important thing is, again, allies are so important. And one of the reasons, you know, such transdisciplinary research and collective action is needed, where we need, you know, the defenders in the forefront, but the practitioners, the community that are working, supporting them, academics, you know, private sector so needs to be more involved. So we really need to have those connections and cohesions that where we bring allies together to support defenders as we, you know, go forward. So thank you again for you know, for having our Bangladesh case study, and I hope, you know, this report can really provide that deeper understanding, insights as we go forward into supporting ocean defenders. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Samia. I guess a few things. I mean, first, thanks for emphasizing that, you know, these conflicts happen both at sea, but also on the coast itself. And indeed, you know, all defenders' efforts and situations are place-based. So, you know, we really need to dig in and deeply understand each place prior to figuring out what sorts of supports are needed, particularly from the perspective of local people. And you do emphasize something that the report and the research really showed, which is that allied organizations can be really important for ocean defenders, particularly in challenging governance contexts. And often research and evidence is something that defenders need for their advocacy efforts for any legal or court cases that they might engage in. That brings me to the next intervention, which is from Alison Wright. And Alison Wright is the director of the Environmental Defenders Collaborative. She's been in this role since the collaborative was formed in 2017. Alison previously consulted with the Mexico Conservation Funders Group, a biodiversity funders group, Tamalpais Trust, and Fondo Acción Solidaria in Mexico. Alison also worked as a consulting lawyer with the Environmental Defender Law Center, and Alison began her career with a decade at Global Green Grants, and she holds a JD from Seattle University School of Law and a BA in Political Science and Environmental Studies from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Alison, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Nathan. And yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. It's really an honor to be a part of this conversation. Huge congratulations to the Ocean Defenders Project on this report, which is such a critical contribution to the field and really a call to action for those of us in the funding realm to devote more resources to ocean defenders around the world. So my institution is an intermediary fund. We have a mandate to support environmental defenders globally. And as a result, unfortunately, the findings of this report feel pretty familiar. They provide further evidence of deteriorating trends faced by environmental defenders and ocean defenders across all regions. We are seeing, and this report illustrates so effectively, that when ocean defenders seek to exercise their human rights, they face the same range of reprisals that we've long seen better documented among terrestrial and freshwater focused environmental defenders. So I know we're running down on time. I'd like to just briefly share a couple of observations from a funder perspective. The first is rooted in the sentence that's in the executive summary of the report, which is that ocean defenders are often thrust into the situation of having to resist and defend against harmful development and harmful projects. They find themselves on the leading edge of resistance against projects that carry direct threats to them, to their livelihoods, to their health, to their territory. And very often this is a position that they did not choose to be in, right? They're in a fundamentally reactive situation. And so, as is true with respect to land and freshwater focused defenders, philanthropy really faces unique challenges to meet these groups where they are, to provide funding that's flexible for and provides the support that they need for their place or case-based resistance, while also accepting the fact that in many cases, these are not groups that aspire to join the ranks of professionalized NGOs. So intermediaries and other funders who work through trust-based networks and who can offer small, flexible support, both to respond to threats, but also to continue the critical work that community-based organizations are leading. They're really, really important partners in efforts to support ocean defenders. Second, and this, I mean, many previous comments on this call have highlighted this as well. While many ocean defenders are mobilized by a hyper-local threat that they face directly, these threats all fit into a broader context of development that carries environmental and human rights harm for all of us, really, right? Specific local campaigns of resistance connect to and can be contextualized within broader strategic and advocacy efforts. And therefore, one of the most critical needs that funding can advance is better connectivity. So resources to support collaboration between informal and community-based organizations with strategic actors, with legal organizations, with scientific organizations and campaigning networks, resources that offer similarly situated community organizations facing common bad actors the chance to come together so that they can share strategies and leverage previous experience, resources that really strengthen the relational infrastructure among the diverse array of organizations and actors that are working to conserve, protect, and restore the oceans. So mine is one of many funding institutions that are working to really deepen our engagement on ocean justice and our support to ocean defenders. I'm optimistic that this report can really help catalyze further philanthropic funding to ocean defenders and to all of the organizations working to protect and support them. Thanks so much for the chance to be part of this conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison, for those words of inspiration to the funding community. I want to note that there was a bit of resignation when you said that the results in this report are sadly familiar. I do applaud the work of the funding communities who are really trying to figure out how to best support ocean defenders on the ground, the local civil society organizations, networks, and as well as allies. It's not an easy task, particularly when the guidance must be taken from as local of a level as possible. That brings me to the last respondent in our panel, and that's Leopoldo Cavalieri Gerhardinger, who's a social ecologist at the National Institute of the Atlantic Forest in Brazil. He's also an oceanographer with a master's in nature conservation from UCL and a PhD in environment and society from UNICAMP. His work focuses on environmental governance, ethnoecology, and socio-environmental citizenship. He's a member of the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers and provides advisory support to philanthropic organizations, non-governmental organizations, and UNESCO on designing fair and sustainable policies for coastal tropical socio-ecological systems. Please go ahead, Leopoldo.
Thank you, Nathan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So yeah, thank you, Nathan, Rocio, and colleagues. I'm very happy to share ideas in this important launch event today. And the Ocean Defenders Report delivers a comprehensive, assertive, and powerfully distills the key messages are vividly illustrated with examples of local to global struggles and the courage of communities actively resisting harmful ocean development activities. Really a true honor to be part of the team of co-authors. But while recognizing the critical importance of these stories, but also the long and winding road ahead of ocean defenders, I suggest that looking at the Brazilian study case on the popular Court of the Sea economy brings us insights to envision what our next steps could look like. Knowledge outcomes alone, such as conflicts, documentation, and analysis, while crucially important, it's probably only the beginning of a more transformative journey for the ocean defenders community of practice. I am a practitioner and believer of a pluriversal and critical approaches to ocean literacy, a term that has become buzzword in our communities, that goes beyond classic ocean literacy, which is often based on a knowledge deficit mindset, which seems to over-rely on the transfer of knowledge to citizens as a precondition for stewardship. Particularly, I engage with a critical approach, which integrates UNESCO's long-standing practices of education and communication around human rights with collaborative learning networks and critical media literacy. We should move beyond just documenting cases of just injustices towards empowering communities to critically shape and lead their own narratives. The insights from the Ocean Defenders point clearly to the need of empowering local communities to lead their narratives, critically challenging the dominant discourses that affect their lives. So in Brazil, the popular Court of the Sea economy provides a compelling practical example of such empowerment, starting from local testimonies recorded to subnational regional encounters, peer-to-peer encounters, up to national conference, which gathered over 100 ocean defenders, mostly artisanal indigenous fishers from across 14 coastal states in the country. They united to scrutinize piece prepared by technicians like us in the Ocean Defenders Project. And they also witnessed a powerful, informative, symbolic judgment in blue economy agents. Here, local communities lead communication processes, define agendas, and guide narratives through participatory practices, significantly influencing ocean governance from their territories up while building crucial social capital through strengthened relationships. So this initiative exemplifies both an authentic participatory approach for engaging with ocean governance and blue economy agendas. However, this pathway is not without risks also. There's an important alert regarding the potential capture of local narratives by larger transnational environmental organizations, for instance, such as organizations can inadvertently dominate narratives, acting as intermediaries between funders and ocean defenders on the ground, due to their substantial resources and media reach, and unintentionally perhaps marginalizing local voices. Therefore, I'll stop here with a few key recommendations for future efforts, which includes that the need for embracing transdisciplinary modalities of research in the future of the Ocean Defenders projects and initiatives alike, and strengthening fisher-driven collaborative learning networks to enhance local capacities in critical media literacy and in advocacy context, in real advocacy context, at all levels, enabling autonomous spaces where ocean defenders can freely control their own narratives and beyond knowledge also gain other much needed competencies while navigating their own blue justice campaigns. So thank you, Nathan, for the opportunity.
Great, and thank you so much, Leopoldo. I want to note that Rocio has just popped a link to Leopoldo's case study on the popular Court of the Sea economy in Brazil in the chat, if anybody wants to read more on that. And yeah, thanks in general for just highlighting the need to really move from knowledge products, which was the sort of the starting place for the Ocean Defenders Project, into these spaces of deep collaboration and empowerment. Highlighting the potential for transdisciplinary engagements and really linking up strongly with fisher-driven networks. These are fantastic points, and they're well taken. Now, I just want to thank all of our panelists for offering your thoughts on what is needed next for ocean defenders. And I'm going to just offer some closing remarks. Globally, ocean defenders projects are protecting marine and coastal environments, their livelihoods and territories, and human rights against threats from the growing ocean economy. They're using diverse tactics to resist these harmful incursions, and yet they're often experiencing repression and violence perpetuated by states and the private sector, including in some cases through lethal attacks. Currently, there is insufficient attention to the situation of ocean defenders, and there's huge gaps in our knowledge, and they're also not receiving adequate support. We take the position that this must urgently change. States and private sector actors must work diligently to respect and protect human rights and to safeguard ocean defenders. Allied organizations must do all that they can to support the advocacy efforts and safety of ocean defenders. Society as a whole also needs to recognize and support the struggles of those bearing the costs of an expanding ocean economy. Ocean defenders are at the forefront of efforts to protect our ocean, and it's our collective responsibility to do all that we can to ensure that ocean defenders are encouraged, are supported, are empowered, are safe, and are celebrated. I invite you to keep your eyes wide open to this challenging and important topic, and to engage with us in your own role and in your own way in this important work. And with that, I am going to close the webinar and invite you to download the report if you want to learn more. You can download it from this QR code or from the resources section of the Ocean Defenders project website. And Rocio has also put a link to the report in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much to the interventions from all of our speakers, to our audience who has tuned in, and many of you have stuck with us through the whole time, and of course, to ocean defenders worldwide who are at the forefront of efforts to protect our ocean environment and human rights. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much for being here.